fire away. And by the way, don't hold back on the questions. If you aren't happy with the 24 steps, I'm perfectly willing to hear it.
Yeah, one question, because you mentioned this about sharing and not owning, and that's one of my main interests right now, to move on to try and open new ways of not ownership, but basically new ways of sharing economy.
Yeah.
What do you think are the challenges for all the new entrepreneurs, just like Airbnb have had, in terms of regulations? Because at this point in history, we only consider, our law only considers public property and private property, and everything that is unknown has no space in regulations. And how do we work with that to try and create a space for ourselves if we work in sharing economy?
So the problem is that as you move from one kind of model world where you own assets to one where you don't own assets, anytime there's change, there's inertia. And the inertia in society is people are making money off this business model, they're going to try to stop this business model. If I'm a taxi driver and Uber's coming into town, I'm going to do everything I can to stop Uber. It's not because the taxi drivers are bad people, it's just because the new model is putting them out of business. It's cannibalizing them, right? And government, by and large, isn't innovative. It's much more conservative. So it adds more inertia to the system. And so your regulations are going to come in to stop the Ubers and the Airbnbs, if at all possible, because the existing players will want to do that. Now you say, well, look, Airbnb and Uber are influencing government. Yeah, because they have a lot of money now, they're going to influence it. And guess what? When the next business model that comes along, Airbnb and Uber, they're going to stop that one. They're going to spend their money to try to do that. So what happens here in regulations is that the government is a force not to help innovation. It's more a more inertia in the system. So what you have to do is you have to find places where they will allow you to forego that regulation. So where are you from? Are you Danish?
From Argentina.
Argentina. And so I just was my office before I came over here, and they're from Dubai. And what's the selling point to go to Dubai is we'll make you so you can fly drones. You don't have to worry about all this regulation. You want to do some innovative thing, we can do it in Dubai. So you're going to have to move to where the governments are more friendly to innovation, and governments are going to be competing against each other to try to attract these new businesses, right? So Amazon now has sent out to the United States, we'd like to set up our second corporate headquarters. Very, very interesting. I don't know, haven't you seen this? Yeah. So Amazon says, we're going to allow everyone in the United States to bid on, any city can bid to get our second headquarters, and we'll bring 50,000 jobs to your city. 50,000 jobs. People are falling all over themselves. New Jersey says we'll give you $7 billion in tax credits if you do that. You know, Boston gets this whole thing, and the governor and the mayor are doing it. Everyone's falling all over themselves to try to get Amazon to come in there. And Amazon's playing this very cleverly because they're playing the governments off against each other to eliminate the regulatory problems that they have. So that's how you do it. You should go and take a look at this and look at all the crazy things that people are doing. They're sending 14-foot cactuses to Jeff Bezos to try to get it. But so you as an entrepreneur, you're going to have to go to where it's friendly for you. You can't just say, I am going to be here no matter what, because the government will there's a good chance that will create inertia, that they will slow you down. They will create friction.
Thank you.
How did you end up here from Argentina?
I ran out of money in Denmark. I was backpacking.
Oh.
Only 3 years ago.
That's it. A true entrepreneur. Cash flow problems? That's okay. Here we go. We'll start again. Yes, ma'am.
Can you apply the 24 steps to art, and in particularly art that is about self-expression?
Are you from Denmark, by the way? Okay. Did you run out of money when you were backpacking? The answer is absolutely. There's someone named Amanda von Getz, and I think she put something up which Maria can show you. It's on our website, where she does piano recitals now. She was at the Juilliard School in New York, and she does piano recitals using the 24 steps. She figures out who does she want to get, and she uses this to be able to do hers, because she knows kind of what music she wants to play, and then she does that. There's also a person at SMU who I think his information is posted on the Dropbox that Maria has as well. And they do an artistic overlay to the 24 steps as well. Look, all the 24 steps it's not magic. This isn't something I invented. All I did was figure out what works from here and there. The beginning of it is design thinking. It's basically, who's your customer? You know, figure out who your customer is, what are their needs and the like. And then you kind of start laying onto it these other elements of it. You know, what I learned at IBM about decision-making unit, decision-making process, you know, kind of blue ocean strategy and crossing the chasm. It's just things that are kind of pulled together that make sense. So yes, what kind of artist are you?
I make animation and sculpture.
Oh wow.
And I think the problem I kind of have is the way we've been working with it so far is that, well, it's not really about the product. You just modify it to the customer's needs.
Yeah.
But I sort of have a limit to how much I want to modify it because it is about my personal expression.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know.
But when you start the process here, you have an idea, you have something, and you have to be willing to kind of change. You might keep it the same, but you might message it differently, right? And then you might say, screw it, I don't, you know, I'm going to just push out, I know what's best for the people, and there you go. But if you do that, let's say you say, this is the type of sculpture I do. I would say, who likes that sculpture? And then once I know who likes it, then I'm going to start finding those people, build a demographic, psychographic, and then how do I attract those people? And then I would start to bring them into the fold. Yes, we'll go back here to the back. Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Collins. I'm from Kenya and I'm student of Innovation and Entrepreneurship.
Oh, welcome.
Yeah, my question relates actually to one of the steps in, if I'm not wrong, is the 22, the minimum viable product.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that there are some industries which are not so forgiving in this sense. For example, you take the food industry,
Yeah, yeah.
where you cannot compromise certain quality standards. If you want to maybe introduce a new alternative product,
Yeah.
you have to meet a certain standard that you cannot avoid. How do you go about such
Yeah.
a situation?
Did everyone hear the question? So he said in step 22, there's something called a minimum viable business product, which is right over here. Minimum viable business product. And there's some industries where you can't just say, like you can put out an app on your phone and say, hey, it kind of works, it doesn't work. But if you're doing brain surgery, you don't want to be going in to say, all right, we're doing this brain surgery and we have a minimum viable product. It might work or it might not work, but let's just get feedback and see how this works with this person's brain. Or, as you're mentioning, food. You don't just give someone food and say, well, that wasn't very healthy, the person died, but what did we learn here? What did we learn in the process? Let's iterate. So the first thing is I wrote this piece, it's in TechCrunch. Do you guys use TechCrunch? And I wrote, it's called Our Dangerous Obsession with the MVP. Session with the MVP. And I would steer you to take a look at that, and it gets into what you said. This was a huge problem I had with the lean startup movement. You know, the problem in entrepreneurship is that because there hasn't been this like rigorous body of knowledge, what's happened is so if this is here's really good entrepreneurship being taught, and what happened was it's increasing, and then the demand, this is the supply, and then all of a sudden entrepreneurship became this super popular thing and it took off. And so this is the demand for entrepreneurship education or training. And so before it took off, there was never developed this body of knowledge about what's good entrepreneurship and what's not. So as soon as it went like this, anyone who could talk about entrepreneurship became an entrepreneurship guru. And since there was no body of knowledge, there was no kind of people to curate what was real or not. And so what happened is whatever the cool new thing that came up was it's crossing the chasm or blue ocean strategy, everybody said, that's the new answer. The new answer is this. And then all of a sudden came lean startup. Everyone said, that's the new answer. Lean startup is the new answer. It answers all the problems. That's crazy. That's crazy. Because what happens is if you're an economist, you have a bunch of fundamental principles. And if something new comes along, you add that new principle to it. And you have a toolbox of things that you do. But what happened with lean startup is everybody said, well, all you need is an MVP and then just iterate. And that's not right. The minimum viable product is something that's helpful at some point, but it's in a context. It's an approach. And it depends on whether you have if you have an app, a software or an app, or a medical device. And those are medical device or food, as you just mentioned. You know, the ramifications of failure here are very, very low. The ramifications of failure here are very, very high. So you have to take this into consideration and mitigate your exposure to that failure as you're doing your minimum viable product. But you do have to break it down and figure out where it is. And that's why we do it later. So your point is dead on. And look, the 24 steps is just kind of this general first principles. Then they have to be applied specifically. At MIT, we have classes to apply it for software. We have classes to apply it in, after you do the introductory class, kind of what you're doing now is an introductory class, like for ice cream and things like that. But then if you want to do software, that's much different than energy, which is different than healthcare, which is different than fintech. And so you have to kind of customize it for those. So I would say you would customize it for that, and you have to understand the exposure. That was a long-winded answer to your question to say, you are right. It depends. It's based on context. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Carl. I'm Danish-American.
Where in the States?
Virginia.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So you worked at IBM for 11 years?
Yes.
Before starting your first business?
Yeah.
I've been told by one or two people that it's a good idea before going out and doing something entrepreneurial or a startup that it's a good idea to work in a larger organization or a larger corporation because maybe you'll get the degree of professionalism or discipline that you need. Would you agree with that, or would you say that sometimes you should just follow your passion and go straight into startups?
So I used to say that, I worked at IBM for 11 years, and I'd say that helped me enormously. Now, there also weren't a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities then, so it is what it is. But what happens at startups is they don't train you to do some really basic things. So if you go into a startup, there's no training budget. It's like, build something, sell something, or get out of here. So they say those are the three things you do in a startup: build something, sell something, or leave. And so I was really happy that I got a chance to go to IBM and get trained in sales, which I didn't know, and how to do technical stuff to be able to apply that, and also, most importantly, how to manage people. Because the biggest problem in a company is not the technology. Believe it or not, it's not even figuring out who the customer is. It's how do you work with this other carbon-based life form called humans, and how do you motivate them and retain them and grow them and add more people. So I think it's a good idea to work at a company before you do that. And I used to tell people that, and then there was one time I told this guy, Freddie Karist, who was a student, I said, Freddie, I know, I think this is great. I'm glad you want to be an entrepreneur, but I think you should go work at Google first. And he got very mad, and he said, you shouldn't be telling me that. You're the head of the Entrepreneurship Center. You should not be telling me that I can't do something. You've told me that if all the fish are swimming this way, I should swim that way. And I want to start a company. I said, okay, all right, Freddie, I'll help you now. Let's go try to do that. Freddie went off and started Okta, OKTA. Today, Okta is a $2 billion company. And when I see him, at least every other time he reminds me that I told him that he needed to go work at Google. So I can't tell you with credibility that that's what you should do. I would say there are benefits to going and working there, but if you feel like you're ready, I'm not to stop you to go out and try to start a company, because guess what? You're going to learn a tremendous amount when you're at a startup, because especially at your age, the thing, and I didn't, my friend from the Faroe Islands says, you all are so young. To be quite honest, you shouldn't be sitting here worrying about work-life balance right now. You should be getting as much experience as you can because you don't know what you want to do. There's no one in this room I can say with clarity, you really know what you want to do 10 years from now. You just don't. And so the best thing you can do is do everything you possibly can. And work isn't that bad. It's like, work isn't the most terrible thing in the world. If you work hard, when I worked at IBM, I just thought it was amazing they would pay me. But if they asked me to do something, I never said, "Oh, are you going to pay me extra for that?" Whatever they said, I would do it. And all those opportunities turned out to give me skills that paid dividends the rest of my life. So when you're your age, I tell you, do everything you can. Work incredibly hard. Have fun with your friends and get to know people. But work is not a bad thing. And take on all the opportunities you can. And in a startup, you get more opportunities than kind of doing that. And now what a lot of people do, my students, even if they go work at Google or someplace else, Facebook, whatever, they have their, quote, side hustle. And so they call me up and say, here's my startup. I say, wait, I thought you were working at Facebook. Oh, yeah, this is my side hustle. So they're working hard. So I probably sound like your parents, but then I could be your parents. Yes, Alexander with half the beard you had in the picture.
After finishing the 24 steps, is there any steps you have wanted to add afterwards?
Yeah.
Or something you wanted?
Yeah, the thing that's not in that book is how do you form a team? How do you deal with all the team things? And people say, oh, you should write a book about that. It's like, no. You should write a book about it. I wrote this article in TechCrunch as well. It's called Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast. And this is a famous, and then products for lunch and everything else for dinner. And believe it or not, that's a quote from Peter Drucker, but that I play off. But believe it or not, this has had millions of people read it, and this just talks about the people aspect of it. And that's a really hard thing. And so I wrote this, which I would encourage you all to read as well, because the 24 steps, you think it's hard, the 24 steps, you'll get it. You just kind of do this once or twice. But if you read this is the really hard part. And that was, where's our psychologist friend? Yeah. The people are the hard part. And how do you come up with a corporate culture? Because here's what happens is you'll get a company and you'll start selling your Tempest Nordic thing. And there'll be 10 people and it will all work. But then all of a sudden it starts growing. And now you got to hire 20 more people. And then you got to hire 20 more people. How do you keep the focus? How do you keep that special? How do you keep what's called corporate culture? That's what'll kill you. Because it's easy when there's 10 of us working in a room, we're all on the same team, we talk to each other every day. But how do you grow that company to keep that special? And that's what this is about. And there's a book called Founders' Dilemmas, which Noam Wasserman, Dilemmas. Do you use that, Maria, in your class here? Sure. And this is a guy that he used to be at Harvard, and he's a guy I work with when I travel. And that's a very interesting book about how do you set up a company, how do you allocate equity, how do you come up with roles, responsibilities, and rewards in a company so that you can do that. This talks about how do I have a unifying raison d'etre? How do I have this thing that my company is really something that everyone's inspired about? Because to be successful, a company has to have a common vision. That's the first thing. Everybody has to say, we're going to do this thing, and we really are excited about this. But then they have to have shared values, which is they trust each other. That if we're working together, I can trust the person on the left and I can trust the person on the right. Because once I do that, then I can do my job and I don't have to worry about them. If you've ever played sports and you don't trust the other people, you're always looking over saying, wait, we're going to do that. I'm doing that, and you don't work well as a team. And the third thing you need a common vision, shared values, and then you need complementary skills. And going back to that first team, it was great how they had different people in different roles. And Maria was telling me how she splits up your teams. We talk about MIT, how we want to have a hacker, that's someone who can build the product. You want to have a hustler, someone who can do the business side and sell the product and work with the customers. And we want a hipster, someone who can work with the user interface to make sure that the customer experience is really great. And those are almost 3 different parts of your brain, or not part of some people's brains at all. Yes, our psychologist.
Alexandra, the psychologist. I come from Russia.
What part?
From Moscow.
Uh-huh.
I have a sort of related question. It's also about like the next steps because when finishing the book, we know our product and we know our core and we know our customer really well, but we don't really know who do we now give it to, because we know who's buying, but maybe we want some investors, and how do we work with those people? I feel like that was a little bit.
So fundraising. Yeah, there's the thing that I would say, there's tons of book on fundraising, and the best way to raise money is to have a really good company. If you want to raise money, have a really good company. And if you have a really good company, there's one amazing way to raise money that's often overlooked. And I'm shocked, because if people do it, then this will improve their valuation. It will allow them to get better investors the next time around. And it just creates less dilution for the shareholders. And that's called sales. Selling product to customers who give you money. It's a really good way to raise money. To get them to give you the money up front, too, and have them prepay for it. And if you want to raise from investors who are going to take part of your company, you want to do that from a position of strength. So before you fundraise, and there are tons of books on this. I didn't feel, when I got to MIT, there was, I think, 3 or 4 classes on this, yet there was no class like on the 24 steps. And the best way to do it is to have a good product market fit. So really what the 24 steps is about is getting product market fit. Now you have to move into this implementation stage. And this is what you're talking about after the 24 steps. And so what I would say, you all have the DE workbook. And what I talk about there, which will help you, is a sales funnel. And if you look at the 24 steps, if you look at the decision-making process, first of all, it starts with the full life cycle use case. Then you take the decision-making process, and you'll make this glorious thing called a sales funnel. And this is what companies use today. And how do I get people to move? How do I get people into the sales funnel? Right? That's suspects. Those are leads, right? How do I get them in here? And then how do I move them from suspects to prospects, down to closed, paying customers, and then satisfied customers, and then advocates for our product. And this is what I go through it. And so the next step after the 24 steps is to build this sales funnel and then just start working this. Because you'll start dropping customers out, and if you go all the way through and you get this, then this will create more of these leads at very low cost, which will give you high yield rates. Because what's key to a business is once you move from the 24 steps to ongoing is how quickly and how many can you move through here. And what matters is the number of leads you get in here at the top, the quality of those leads as you get in here, and then your yield rate as you go through each stage. And so what you want to do is get a lot of high quality leads to drop in here, and then your yield rates as you go through here, and the time it takes to go from one step to the other. That's how you'll make a fantastic business. And one of our companies is called HubSpot, and that's exactly what they do, but that's the essence of it. When you're done with getting the product market fit, you start to get customers, the dogs are eating the dog food, then you manage this process, and that's how you'll drive revenue in a profitable, sustainable way. And the other thing here is you're now running your business with metrics. So you'll know where the problem is. You'll know where the choke point is, and then you can focus in and say, our problem is that people are coming to our website and they're filling it out, but once we do the demo, we're not getting them to convert from the demo to the sale. All right, let's find out what the problem is there, and you get your magnifying glass and you focus on that. So this is more in the DE workbook. You do have the red book? Yeah. And I start to go into that. So that'll really help you where you go here.
We sort of had a question also in our groups about the workbook.
Yeah.
It was that sometimes we didn't really have an example for filling in some of the, like there are a lot of tables. And
Maria told me that last night. Well, it's obvious to me. I don't know why it's not obvious to you. That's a good point. I never thought about that. I tried to put some examples in the back.
Yeah, the examples were good, but
Yeah.
it was just like some very concrete of exactly how do you fill it.
So what I'll probably do is I'll probably we're going to have a website where you can go in and get some of those, and that's something I'm taking back. Can always improve. It's hard to write one of those books, though, let me tell you. Thank you for the feedback, though.
But we really love making a brochure, actually. That was a very fun and team uniting step, I think, for us. And it goes, I think, as an extra to one of the steps.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's high-level products. Can everybody hear what she's saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's two things I want to say is that the brochure is really helpful, and you should make more than one brochure. You should have like, oh, this is one, but what about this? This is what you call A/B testing. So you can, so if she's a potential customer, you say, here's one. What do you think about that? What do you think about that? And see how they respond to it. The other thing that she said that's really very interesting, which is everybody kind of rushes through in our class at MIT because it's like yours, you have a semester to do it. In real life, it's not just getting to the answer. It's not, and there's usually multiple answers. It's the process of getting all the team united. Because remember, the most important thing is the team. And so if I just come out and say, the answer is 256, the answer, here's our persona, and people go, all right. But they don't buy into it, you're not going to have this united front. And building consensus on the team is incredibly important. I'm taking too long to answer questions. Yes?
Bill, I have a question about the business development part.
Yeah.
In the startup I'm working right now, we do it kind of in an old-fashioned way. So we use HubSpot.
Yeah.
We have a CRM system. We do our research. We put
Yeah.
the contacts, and we do cold emailing and
Yeah.
cold calling.
Yep.
And I believe it's a very old-fashioned way of getting the customers in a
Yeah.
SaaS startup.
Yeah.
What I'm doing right now is also creating. I'm a part of a startup where we connect students and projects within the marketing area, and I'm planning.
Are you in the incubator?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're the one in the top out there.
Yes.
Yes.
My startup used to be there.
Oh yeah, your picture's on the incubator. Is it? Yeah. Was it? Yes, that's the one I saw. You're famous.
Good to know. So I'm designing a new way of developing a business in my startup or a startup I'm a part of. And other than cold emailing or the Watergate, where you go to places that your potential customers might be or might hang out.
They call that Watergate?
No, how was
Water
it?
hole.
Water holes. Water holes. Yeah.
Watergate. No, it's not Watergate. So how do you create, what would you think about the business development 2.0, where you just create a new way of developing a business?
So hopefully everybody heard the question. The question is, she's working at a company now and they do it the old-fashioned way where they smile and dial. They get a bunch of names and they call people up and say hello, and what happens? They hang up 99% of the time. Or they send emails. And I'm sure all of you love spam emails, right? You just open them up right away. You're so excited, right? Yeah, this is old. That's kind of old school, and it's a known way, and it works, but the efficiency is going down. What's the future of these business development? The future is very clear. It's bots, right? It is. I shouldn't say bots. It's preference engines. It's how do you scrape data and figure out who are the best customers for you? And how do you know how to scrape data? You build a demographic psychography. You come up with proxy products. You come up with these other things. If you like this, then you will like that. You all use Amazon? Does everybody use Amazon here? No? Who doesn't use Amazon?
I don't use Amazon.
Why?
I don't use anything from America.
Wow, wow.
I've skipped some kind. I've not Coca-Cola, for example. I cannot skip that one, but I tried.
Why do you hate America?
I don't hate America. I just feel like, as you said, there's such a big and inspiring way that you feel like you have to express yourself over there.
Yeah.
Just because you've been held down.
Yeah.
Just by being yourself. For example, you said it yourself, you have Trump right now as president.
I didn't say his name. I did not say his name. It's Voldemort. Voldemort.
So I don't hate America. I just think that it's one of the places in the world that creates most of the bad things in the world. Yeah.
Okay, there's a whole nother issue that we could deal with here, but let's go back to the Amazon thing. First of all, wasn't it kind of spooky when you went into Amazon and like you saw, you might like this product and you actually liked it? You're like, oh, this is so weird. Yeah, you didn't, at first you felt like that's weird. That is really weird. But how many of you like it now? Like when they recommend it? I like it. I go in there and I order like a specials album, and then they come back and say, oh, if you like the special, here's the English beat, here's, these other like. You all like Pandora and Spotify, right? That's all that is preference engine stuff. It's telling you what you like. It's like if you went to a store and someone came up and say, oh, it's good to see you again, Bill. By the way, we have these new pair of Cole Haan shoes that you might like. Oh, thank you very much. Why do you think I would like them? Because they're very similar. And so that's what preference engines are. And how much do they cost? Marginal cost zero, right? Because again, we're dealing with data. It's like, this is why Amazon, and let me go back to Amazon for a second. So that's the future, is preference engines that make this, what will improve your yield rates as you go through here? What will improve this is preference engines, to go out and get the data and understand that you're getting the best possible ones and then moving them through here. Now let's just go back to Amazon for a second, because this is fascinating with Amazon. Amazon now is like air. It is everywhere. It is everywhere. When we go to, we're going to have a party and we're going to buy some stuff. First place we go, Amazon, to buy Spike Lee, stuff. And then I come to work, and at the office they go, can you get me Amazon AWS credits for our startup? And then you sit and you go home, and then it's like an Amazon movie, and then you sit down and you're trying to read something, and it's the Washington Post, which you got free because you have Amazon Prime. And now all of a sudden Amazon is buying the grocery stores in Whole Foods in the United States. They're playing 50,000 people and playing all these cities off against each other. They're moving into advertising, and they are going to probably crush Google in advertising. They're going to take away, because they don't know, Google knows what websites you go to. What does Amazon know? Amazon knows what you buy. They know what your buying preferences are. So this should scare you even more.
I hate that. It's
Yeah. I hate it too, but I still do it. By the way, I have nothing, but let's just go back. Okay, right to a second Amazon is like is going to be one of the biggest, most powerful companies in the world. And do you remember where they started? Books. That highly profitable, fast-growing industry that everybody wants to get into, right? That's right. That was sarcasm, all right? That was sarcasm. They started with a beachhead market and then methodically grew it from there. And they figured out what their core was, the back-end processing, kind of developing some of these data analytics, and then getting in a virtuous cycle. And now look at Amazon. People like to say, well, look at Mark Zuckerberg. I saw the movie. That's not the best example of disciplined entrepreneurship. Like, hey, you do this and come up with this crazy idea in college, you write some code, you plug a computer in, and then it just blows up. No, that's not how it usually works. It's more like Jeff Bezos methodically going through to build this gigantic company. So Amazon is a very interesting one. And if you think about disciplined entrepreneurship, think about Amazon and what they've accomplished. Yes?
I have more like a technical question regarding step 4, the beachhead and the total addressable market.
Yes.
Because in our group we have had some difficulties with this, and it's my belief that other groups have had that as well. And we consulted some of the teachers, and as great as they are great. But
All your teachers
yes,
are fantastic.
but they actually had some trouble answering, because for like for our beachhead market is it's families.
Yeah.
Their kids are 5 to 13 years old.
Yeah.
They live in Copenhagen, and they earn a certain amount of money each year. And those are several like criteria that we need to search for. And like with the Lamborghini guy, he goes to certain clubs and dates models, and he earns a certain amount. How do, like, I think my question would be, how is this like the TAM, is it an approximate number? How would you approach the issue? Like, how would you, the method for searching, like, and get the most exact number, and like taking all these different criteria?
Yeah, so this is a part that's a little, is one of the, frankly, weaker parts to transfer across, you know, from the United States to someplace else. So your point is a very good one. And Maria was getting me on the way from the airport last night on this issue. So in the book, I talk about TAM being, you know, from like 20 million to 100 million is a good one, right? And that is revenue per year, right? That's if you're in Denmark, that's probably way too big, right? You could have a much smaller one. The question that I would have is, can you get in this, in your beachhead market, can you, so if you look at the workbook, there's a lot more things in there. So because TAM is revenue per year, right? Can you see from over there? It's revenue per year. There's a number of limits to that. Now, it's just like you have to choose something so we can compare it for simplicity. So as Einstein said, seek simplicity and distrust it. So we can say revenue per year, 20 million. Well, let's say it's 1 million, okay? 1 million per year. That doesn't tell me enough. I don't know if you can see from over there, because it doesn't tell me how profitable this is. If it's 1 million and I make, you know, 5% profit on it, that's not very good, right? But if it's $1 million a year and it's pure profit, I'm just selling electrons, I'm just selling software, I'm just selling data, that's a totally different market, right? So this profitability, this what we call gross margin, I don't know if you all talk about that, of this, that's the first thing that you should know. The second thing is how much time will it take for you to get to this market? Will it take you 3 years?
My question is, how do I find, I mean, I get the revenue per year.
Yeah.
But how do we, like, we want the TAM size that is...
To calculate it?
Yeah, how to calculate it.
Okay.
Because we have different search criteria.
Yeah.
And because, as I said, our family of 2 kids,
Okay.
5 to 13, we can figure out how many families there are in Copenhagen. How
Yeah.
do we figure out like the kids in a certain age?
So you'll come up and you'll have what? There will be 120,000? Or what, how many is
that's
it?
Actually pretty accurate.
That's an accident. That's lucky. Okay, so it's 120,000. So what we know now is we have a number of people, right? In this case, the unit is family. Is that right?
Yeah, families with kids 8.
Okay, so there's 120,000. We still don't know what the revenue per year is. So how would we calculate the revenue per year? Anyone? So at this point, we're going to have to figure out what the average spend is. How many spend per year per family, right? All right? Because if we have this and we multiply it by this, this will give us the TAM number we want, right? And it still doesn't tell us profitability, how long it will take to do that. It won't tell us, is this an all or nothing market? Will I only get 10%? Is this all going to be spread out, or is it a winner takes all? It also won't tell me what strategic value I get by winning this market. All that stuff's in the workbook. We'll look through that. But this question of, if I have this, I'd have to figure out how much the average spend per year to do what? What are they doing? Ice cream?
Yeah, we're making this experience economy thing where we make events for kids' birthdays where they can come and design their own things.
Events for kids' birthdays. Okay. So let's do this as a group. Right? Let me do it. Anyone? How would she do this?
But isn't it about how many? Because you have to multiply the price with the number of orders per year with the Bayesian market, right? And
Exactly.
If this is 120,000 with 2 kids, that makes 2 orders per year multiplied by the price multiplied by 120,000.
So you're going to have to figure out how many. What's the average number of kids?
But that wasn't it the number, right? 120,000 is the
Right,
woman with 2 kids.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So what's the average number of kids? Do you know?
2. We would
2.
say, but it's more like,
Okay.
like there
Yeah,
is-
but you would have to know this to the point that you just said, because we're going to have to figure out what we're going to try to figure out how many events per year, and then how much would they be willing to spend per event, right? So if there's 2 kids, that means there's 2 birthdays per year, unless everyone's happy here. Do they have more than 1 birthday a year? Is that how you all get to be so old? Right? No?
But it's not. I'm sorry, but it's not. Maybe it's not. It's not easy to answer, but it's not really my question because it gets calculated.
Oh, okay.
My question is, how do I find the total addressable market? I mean, the people, the customers, because we have a beachhead market that consists of people that like have the certain criteria.
Yeah.
So how do I like? How would you approach? How would you find out how many Lamborghini guys there are? Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So for the Lamborghini, let's just go through that. So you would go through. You have a good demographic. You have good psychographic. How many are divorced? How many make over $2 million a year? That are around 50 years old, give or take, that work in the financial services sector, that work in the legal sector, that work in the accounting sector, that work in real estate. Those numbers are not going to be just, I searched the internet, right? What you do is, some of this is in the book for the Disciplined Entrepreneurship workbook, is you have to go do bottoms up. You go to a law firm and you say, you kind of like look at that law firm and you say, how many people meet the Giovanni profile? And you might go to Goodwin Procter and you find out they have 300 lawyers and they have about 3 people. So that means to me, I can make an estimated guess that 1 in 100 lawyers is a Giovanni. And then how many lawyers are there in big law firms? Because a small law firm, those aren't going to be it. So how many lawyers are making this much money?
You make a lot of assumptions actually when you do when you calculate or when you find the beachhead or
Yes.
persona. And just making sort of an assumption or an average.
Yeah, and you lay out what your assumptions are so that they're very clear, so that somebody understands, because that's the key thing. The final number is less important than here are all the assumptions, so that someone can say, wait a second, that makes sense or that doesn't make sense. And then if it changes, I said it were 1 in 100, and someone said, well, it could be 1 in 50, then all of a sudden you could do it. But this number is just, the reason you do a total addressable market is, and some of my students come back and the first time they do it, they say it's 26.2 million. It's like, you don't know it's 26.2 million. All you know is that it's about 20 million. You think it's more than 20 million, but it's just, is that a big enough market? It's not a specific number. It's like, is this a big enough market? Is it too small? Is it too big? Is it about right? Now, if it's about right, then you're going to find out that you segment it later and that you're not going to address that entire market. Is it still big enough? Or is it, and then you would kind of march forward. It's just understanding the marketplace. Did I answer your question? until I sit down and go through it with you, you're not going to be happy. There's two people I'm never going to make happy here.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think this total addressable market thing is important, though, because I think some people get caught up on a number and they kind of get stuck, whereas you just have to keep moving. You have to say, is it too big? If it's $1 billion, that's good. No, that isn't good. That's bad. It's too big. You need to make a smaller market.
But it's still a crucial step to get somewhat right.
Yeah,
Because
that's
if
right.
you just miscalculate, get the statistics wrong, doesn't take certain criteria into consideration, then,
Yeah.
then it's not valid.
So let me give you an example of someone that's just in my office last week. They're from Germany, and they're from Germany, and he's come to MIT, and he's done the 24 steps, and he's really he's like, we did our beachhead market, and it was cheerleaders in Germany. Do you know what cheerleaders are? Like, and they're like, we dominate cheerleaders in Germany. And they're like, well, what's your revenue? He's like, it's $100,000 a year, and it's like, that's not big enough. Thank you. That's not big enough. And so the question is, they can't get any more out of that market. They can get a little bit more, but they want to be a big company. And so what do you do? If you're dominating that market, what do? You really have two options. Oh, thank you. That's better. Thank you.
I will wait for the next one.
Gets higher and higher. What would you do? You dominate cheerleaders, and you're rolling. You make clothing for cheerleaders in Germany. What do you do? What do you do next? What's your next move? Yes.
Take a look at maybe markets that are similar.
So you have two clear options. You can take and go to the cheerleading market in neighboring countries. So you can take the same product and just move to new markets. Or you can take the same customer and try to sell them additional stuff, right? Those are the two options you have, right? So you could go to cheerleaders and you could go to do it. They don't feel comfortable taking cheerleading and going to other countries. But they also don't feel comfortable selling cheerleaders a lot more stuff because they're getting a big part of their budget now. So we had this long discussion about, well, what is your core? And they said our core is kind of customized clothes so that people can move around, well, for athletic people. So now their next market they're looking at is volleyball players, female volleyball players in Germany. Now my question then is that really a very big market? So the TAM question will come into play again here. Are you moving to a new market that's going to be another $100,000 when you get total market, and it's going to take you 2 years to get there? You have your core. Can you really move to a market where you can, that's 20 million now, where you can move to be a big company? Because they want to be a big company. The big ambitions. Okay, time. Can we just do one last question? I'll answer it in 140 characters. Yes?
My question is regarding to which tools you use when you work with the 24 steps. Because right now we're using Microsoft Word when we work with every tool other than step 4 and Excel.
Yeah.
I want to know, do you have some special software programs that you work in to be more proactive?
A former student wrote something that Maria knows well, called Marius Ursace from Romania, wrote something called DE Toolbox. You can go in and look at detoolbox.com. I hate to not answer questions, so we'll do them very quickly. Ma'am, did you have a question?
But it's something completely different than the 24 steps. Is that okay?
As long as it's not about the man whose name must not be said.
I would like to know your opinion about having a CSR strategy in startups.
Having a what strategy?
CSR strategy, corporate social responsibility.
So if you look at the Disciplined Entrepreneurship Workbook, I think that every company should have a raison d'etre. Why are you in business? Why is the world a better place because this organization exists than it doesn't exist? And that, to me, is where the corporate social responsibility comes in. Because I believe all entrepreneurs do have a social responsibility, and they have a social conscience to do it. I don't think that's what you lead with, however. We used to have this thing at MIT called social entrepreneurship, and then my class was disciplined entrepreneurship. When I took over, I put them in together, and at first they grumbled. I said, I drive a Prius, I understand, Then they thought, but I cut them no slack and they've been very, very happy because their organizations get much more disciplined and they're much more sustainable. If you have an organization and you depend on people guilting them to give you money, that's not a good strategy as far as I'm concerned. Unless you're the Catholic Church, but it's not working very well now. But we have one Catholic from Argentina in the back. I just don't buy that. You can look, if you go to Shop Soko, if you look at, in Kenya we have one of ours called Sanergy. They look, what value can they create, and then where's an economic buyer where they can extract some. And they're not in it for profit. They're in it to have impact. And this is where the other part where TAM is wrong. TAM is just about revenue per year. There's another overlay that says how much impact do we have? How many people per year do we do it? So I don't think that we should get into kind of moralistic lessons. I think you have a good raison d'etre, and then you have a disciplined business that achieves that goal, then you're going to be achieving good things for society. That's not the answer you want to hear. But are there any other quick questions I can answer? Yes.
Can I have one last? I just wanted to ask that I found that all the steps, even in the last steps, there are risks that you have to start everything again.
Yes.
How can you eliminate that risk? How can you do that?
You can't eliminate that risk to zero, but sometimes that's the best thing you can do. So in my class, some people, it's not like your classes, I'm going to take back a few things here. One of them is like you have ice cream. Some of my people come up with, ideas that they don't get enthusiastic about, and halfway through the class they go, oh, I can't do this. What do I do? And then we just say start over, because the second time you do it, it's much faster than the first time. And so the real value is not that you came up with an answer. It's knowing how to fish, how to do the process. And the second time you do it, much, much faster. And we have a 1-week class, and sometimes people in the third day, they say, it's not going to work. I say, should we do? Should we just keep going? I say, no, don't ride a dead horse here. Don't try to ride a dead horse. Start it over again. They go, can we do that in 2 days? I said, I think you can. And it's much faster a second time. The same thing happens in software. If you write software, I don't know if any of you write software, you write it, and you try it, and it doesn't, and even if it works, you throw it out, and then you start over again, and you write it clean. So the second time, you're better off than the first time. So I have a shirt that I didn't wear today. It's called Stay Calm and Trust the Process. And if it doesn't work, don't try to act like it works. That's the worst thing. I have some people who they raised a bunch of money, millions of dollars in the United States, and they weren't comfortable that it worked, and it didn't work, and it's just a living hell for them because they have to act like it works. Some of them have the ability to just give the money back to the investors, but some of them just can't do that. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Just try something else. There's many opportunities around.